What costs a lot of money but should actually be free? Alright, here's the rundown. Sorry for not using the right terminology, I'm not a native speaker. But 1. Somebody has to pick up the body and store it. About 1K. 2. You need a licensed funeral home because legally you can't just dump it yourself, you need your friendly body dumping professional. 3. You have to pay them to get the body, if, as was the case for us, you weren't prepared and didn't make arrangements for them to pick the body up in the first place. Another 1K or so. 4. Then you need to get it cremated, because dumping the whole body requires a casket, which actually costs even more. Around 500 I think. 5. Earn for the ashes, another 200 or so. 6. Then you need to pay them to deliver the body to the spot. Another 200 or 300. 7. Pay for the spot, 1.5K or so. 7. Have somebody dump the ashes, not allowed to do that yourself. Another 100 or 200. Oh, also service fee. Not kidding. That was an actual item on the final recipe. Literally just went through this with my father-in-law. In our state, the cheapest casket you can buy for cremation is basically a piece of wood for the bottom with cardboard sides. $200. I could build this for about $10. It's criminal in my opinion. There is a lot of money to be made when someone dies, and it starts with paying a doctor to sign the death notice because the hospital won't release the body until that is done. Then it's paying the city council for the rights to administer estates on behalf of the deceased, which requires proof of death, and the will to prove you're the rightful representative of the deceased, all have tacked on admin fees. Then the body can be released to a funeral home, which costs money. The fixation and embalming process costs money so your loved one doesn't decay for the funeral. You then have to pick a casket, which costs easy 3K plus even if you get a cremation, because you're not just cremating the body, it has to be burned in a casket. Then for the service of a hearse and the ceremony itself. You then need to settle debts from the estate if applicable and tie up all the loose ends. Luckily a lot of places the deceased have contracts with will forego contract termination. Example is any TV or telecommunications, they'll just terminate the contract and apologize and send condolences as opposed to charging you a termination fee, which would be obscene, but I wouldn't be surprised if some places tried. You do have to settle any outstanding tax liability as well. Hopefully all of that is covered from assets in the estate of the deceased, but it isn't always that simple. Trying to convince my wife to donate me to the local university. They take care of everything, costs you nothing, and after a year, they cremate you and send the ashes back. She won't go for it, said she couldn't stand the thought of them experimenting on me. Me's not there. Me's dead, it's just the meat. 0.00 cost to us, unless she wanted to rent a place to have a shindig/memorial/wake. Which is not required. It's called sky burial and it's done in some parts of Asia. They put the corpse on the mountain so other animals would feed from it and so would decompose to be useful for natural environments. It's been always my dream to go through this after I die. It's a way to give back to our planet instead of spending thousands of dollars on bullshit. UK ex-funeral director here. Whilst a lot of things do cost way too much, burial permits, DRS fees for a signature, etc., I can only say the frontline funeral staff are underpaid. We would work all day and be on call through the night. The place was never unstaffed and the police would call us out to all sorts of horrific things. The scenes we would regularly attend were not worth the barely above minimum wage we were getting paid. Hence the ex-funeral director. Pretty much every hospital is in or near a city center and also on some sort of public transit line, at least bus. Most hospitals you would have endless parking issues otherwise. My local hospital has a free parking lot for the ER. You never were able to park there if you went to the ER, and they kinda handled it by a permanent day security guard just standing in the lot asking everyone who parks where they are going. And it's still basically a SHT show. That's what the big one in the city does near me. Discharge papers validated parking. And there is off-site free parking with shuttles as well. And the ER has a security guard but otherwise free, so if you're coming in normal, and going or bringing someone to ER, they'll pass you through no problem. If you're coming in hot, hazards, horn, etc., they just open the gate early for you. This is ridiculous. I was in the ER in November. When I was leaving I asked about validating the parking since I was in the ER. They told me I had to go to the attendant who said it was discounted and it was $3. I gave her a $5, but she did not have change. She had to run inside to get the change. I begged her to keep the change and just give me the stupid ticket so I could leave. She refused. I stood on the sidewalk waiting for my change while miscarrying because this woman would not let me go. Then I got the bill for the hospital. Professional athletic stadiums. It shouldn't be the taxpayers paying for multi-million arenas for professional teams. The owners of the teams should be paying for their own stadiums and renting it out for events on off-season. Putting that burden and risk on taxpayers is outrageous. If the people pay for it, we should be allowed to utilize it like a park. Why can't all homeless people sleep there because it's warm and there's access to clean water? It's a massive empty building. And then they charge taxpayers for maintenance, even though they run it as a capitalist business. The cheapest beer they sell is $12 for a SHT beer. Why aren't they using those profits instead? I just wish giant stadiums didn't exist. It's just another platform for excess waste and consumerism that doesn't benefit anyone except the wealthy. I mean, I'm all for letting stadiums be used for things on off days. Like I've always thought baseball fields should be open to the public to let regular people toss the ball around on a big league field on at least some off days. How effing cool would that be for kids? Monitored, of course. They need to be in good condition so it's safe for the athletes and all that. This is a good one. I remember reading years ago about an NBA team that caused controversy by pretty much demanding that their new arena should be funded by public money, to the point where I think they even threatened, or perhaps insinuated, they would relocate otherwise. I'm not even American, so it didn't affect me in any way, but even I was outraged at how ridiculous that was. Taxpayers have to pay outrageous ticket prices to go see NBA games, they have to pay outrageous prices for parking, and while in the arena they have to pay outrageous prices for mediocre food and drink. And for the privilege of going through all that, they first have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to have the arena constructed in the first place? If the taxpayer is going to pay for it, then they should be allowed to enter for free or, at the most, a nominal sum. You can't ask taxpayers to pay hundreds of millions to build the thing, and then also pay thousands for being allowed to use the thing. Tax preparation and filing. In a lot of developed countries, the government just sends you a summary of what you made and what you owe. If everything's okay, you either don't have to do anything or just acknowledge that it's okay. And you can easily correct it if the summary is not accurate. I think this really helps keep people honest instead of trying to hide income or just forgetting to include it. But in the USA, tax preparation companies have lobbied for decades to keep this from happening here. Because of course corporate greed is one of the most common reasons why we can't have nice things. What's hilarious is people can file their taxes wrong, and then the government can say actually you owe us this much money. Like, okay, if you knew that, why don't you just send bills to people? You already have access to all our records, don't make us fill something out that you already know. Eli Lilly, manufacturer of insulin, recently, December 22nd I think, announced that they would be capping out-of-pocket costs for insulin at $35 per month. A surprising move as this came after the Twitter blue check mark fiasco where someone impersonated them and announced insulin would now be free, which caused their stock to take a hit. It wasn't the Twitter debacle that made them lower their price. Corporations have no shame. It was California announcing they were going to start producing their own insulin for cheap that made Eli Lilly realize they better take $35 rather than $0. Interesting. I wasn't saying the Twitter debacle caused it, was just highlighting that the Twitter debacle indicated a drop in pricing hit share price hard, but they did this in spite of that possibility happening again, because it wasn't as impactful and had a calculated reason they could present to shareholders, of course.